Welcome to Speaking of Grace, the weekly message podcast from the WholeLife Church in Orlando, Florida. We're a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-generational congregation committed to our mission of loving people into a lifelong friendship with God. We are committed to our vision of being a church without walls, fully engaged in serving the people of our community. Thank you for joining us as we continue Speaking of Grace. Hello, Speaking of Grace listeners. This is Randy Magray, podcast producer and host here at WholeLife Church. I know that normally right now you are expecting to be listening to the message from this past week at WholeLife Church. This past week was, of course, Christmas, and we had an outdoor service only. It wasn't recorded. It wasn't a traditional style church service with a typical message, and so everything was done outdoors. It wasn't recorded, so there is no message per se to put here for you. So what I have done is, in case you may not be aware, there is a companion podcast that comes out every week from WholeLife Church that is called This Is WholeLife. I am the host, and it features our senior pastor, Ken Wetmore, and our associate pastor, Jeff Sincamani, where we take the message and we break it down. We talk about it in more detail. If there's questions left over from the Q&A that you hear on Speaking of Grace each week, if there are extra questions, we also cover those in greater detail. You can send us questions about the message or any comments that you have to 407-965-1607, text message or voicemail, or send an email to podcast@wholelife.church, and we will answer them on that podcast. So if you swipe up in today's show notes, there is a direct link in the notes that will take you directly to the podcast link tree that will basically take you to any way that you listen to podcasts, whether it's on Apple or Android, mobile or desktop. You'll find a link right there that'll take you to that podcast, and I would encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already. All right, all that being said, this is what you would normally hear on episode 291 of This Is WholeLife. It's called Keep the Change, a look back at 2021. So I hope you enjoy. And again, if you haven't listened to This Is WholeLife before, please take a minute, pause, and swipe up in today's show notes, hit that subscribe button and the link, and then listen each and every week on Wednesday mornings. So hope you enjoy. I hope you had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And now, on to the podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 291 of This Is WholeLife. I am your host, Randy, as always, and Ken and Jeff are not here this week. Got the week off. It is the week between Christmas and New Year's, and we pondered what to do. And so actually I talked to Ken a little bit earlier today, and we came up with the idea, or he came up with the idea of kind of doing a little a wrap up of the year, and he suggested that maybe we go back and hit a few highlights. So that's what we're going to do today. And before we get started, I want to read a text message that came through after last week's episode, and it was in response to our discussion about peace. It starts with, "Great podcast. While humans are not the origin of peace, once unwrapped, it is meant to be shared, be grown, to, yes, be created. Peacemakers do so unaware of the power working in them to choose the quiet answer. The Holy Spirit enables the genuine Christian to lose the jack-in-the-box anger and finger-pointing. Why would an unbeliever want that gift? Leave it wrapped. It's replaced with an extension of humble peace and love, as Ms. Houston put into practice. Not in that moment gritting her teeth, but a muscle, a daily requesting of the Spirit, the daily development of the spiritual reflexes of peace and true love. This gift is then braided into our talents and personalities and recreated to bless our brother as the hands and feet of Christ's peaceable kingdom, ever searching to create a balm to a neighbor's pain and to offer a better way." I'm not sure who sent that, but thank you very much for sending your comments and your ideas. And this is beautiful. I love the ending. Ever searching to create a balm to a neighbor's pain and to offer a better way. And the other one, to keep it wrapped. Why would an unbeliever want that gift, right? Leave it wrapped. Jack in the Box, anger and finger pointing. I couldn't agree more. So again, thank you, whoever you were or whoever you are, for sending that in. We always appreciate your feedback and your ideas as it pertains to what we're talking about. And even if it's not exactly what we're talking about, but something we missed or something we didn't say or something we should have said better, you can always send them in 407-965-1607. That's voicemail or text, and you can remain anonymous as this person did successfully, or podcast at WholeLife.church if you are of the email persuasion. All right, we started the year. Our first episode was January 6th, and the speaker that week was John Monday, episode 240, Stewarding the Gospel of Worthiness. And it was a great message. That was a great series. We started off strong. Episode 240, if you want to go back and keep scrolling down, you'll find episode 240 in the prior episodes list of whatever podcast app you're listening on, and would invite you, if you missed it, to give it a listen, or if you're new to the show, go back and check it out. But it's how we started 2021 with our executive pastor, John Monday, at the helm. Take a listen. This new series, Stewarding the Gospel. When this idea or this message was presented to you, John, what were you thinking as you went into this?
Well, to start with, it was Andy's presentation of an idea, so I was just extremely grateful. And Andy knows it's probably how come I only preach maybe once a year, because I pretty much only have one thing to say, and that's my understanding of the gospel. So this year, Andy came and said, well, this is the series, and it's on stewardship, and, so I was like, yeah, great. And then he said, no, the stewardship of the gospel. And I said, okay, you've got me. I'm hooked. And then he, as Andy does, he let me run with it. And I went back and checked in to make sure I wasn't running afoul of his thinking too much. But yeah, I mean, the gospel fundamentally is what we are all about as a church and as Christians. And back to your point of, the gospel still being relevant. It's what we believe. It's fundamental to everything that we believe. We believe that we were created for the gospel. And so if the gospel is no longer relevant, then it's a denial of everything that we believe as Christians.
As usual, John always has a way with words in putting things that you feel and things that you know into a different context, but just pointing it out point blank. Usually it's direct, straight to the point, and no muss, no fuss. I always appreciate that about John Monday. And like he said, we only get him about once a year, maybe twice if we're lucky, but it's always a pleasure to have him on the podcast. All right, that was January 6th, episode 240, if you want to go back and check it out. Of course, we couldn't even discuss 2021 without mentioning the biggest thing that had happened at Florida Hospital Church / WholeLife Church in decades. And that was the idea of there being a new senior pastor at the church. Andy McDonald had served that church, our church, for 37 years, and his retirement came, and as everyone knew it would, and it passed as everyone knew it would. Tears were shed, and while we've missed Andy, we also knew that there were plans from God for who would follow him, and that's a little bit daunting when you figure someone's been somewhere 37 years. And little did we know that our new senior pastor would be arriving in a little while. So we skip ahead to March 30th, episode 252, which was Andy's final episode. And it was in his final series called Final Things to Remember. And the last thing he wanted us to remember as he left was there's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. That's a great set of messages in that series. I would go and look for all of those. 252 is the final one and the final time we had Andy on the podcast together. And so take a listen as we wrap that up. Well, Andy, there's not much else to say, but thank you for everything that, I mean, I've only been here a short time out of the near 4 decades that you've been here, but I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together as colleagues here on the podcast. And when I've had a chance to bend your ear here and there at the church and church retreat and all those things, lots of good memories, even in those short 5 years, but we will definitely miss you here every week.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your hard work. You've done all the work. All we do is just answer your questions. It's pretty. I've had the easy seat, but compared to having getting it already. So you've done a great job with it, and hope that people enjoy it, even post production now times.
Yeah.
But I'll be anxious to see what comes next.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week. Next week, it'll be episode 253. It'll be Randy and Jeff. And then I don't know if we've talked about it much here, but Ken Wetmore will be our new senior pastor, and they will be arriving in a few months. And so we've had Andy, did we talk for 3 minutes that day about the podcast and different things when we were together in the same room trying to get a video shoot done? And so I think Ken has a lot of the talents that would lend great things to a podcast. And so we will discuss with him once he arrives. And, in the meantime, we'll continue on. We'll continue to look at the messages each week with Jeff and I, or if someone else is the guest speaker for the week, we'll include them. So don't go anywhere. We'll still be here, and we'll keep you updated as things, come into focus, as they will. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks as always for listening, and have a great week. What a great episode that was to finish off that series and to finish Andy's time with us here at WholeLife Church, and before that, Florida Hospital Church, and many other names throughout the years. But it was a sad day, and it was also a day to reflect and look forward and to know that God had something good for us coming at WholeLife Church. And even at the end of that episode, you could hear that we knew it was Ken, but we didn't really know that much about Ken. I had only met him once, just in passing. He was here. We did a little promo with him and Andy in the old worship cafe, and it was run and gun, try to get it done super fast. And we had no time to talk. He knew we had a podcast, but I think that was about it. I don't know if he had listened to it yet or not, but since we have started working with Ken as our senior pastor and here on the podcast, it has been a delight to have him and be a part of the podcast every single week. I always tell people I had like 5 years with Andy. Every week I had his ear. I could ask him questions. I could pick his brain before, during, and after the podcast. And I felt blessed to have someone like Andy who would be willing to tell you whatever you needed to hear, how he saw it. And I appreciated that so much. And Ken is much in the same way, where I feel like he never pulls any punches. He just lets you know what he thinks and what he feels, and always does it with kindness or with some levity. And I don't know about you, but I particularly appreciate that. All right. So next I want to point ourselves that it came out not that long after. It was just a mere couple of months. It was episode 263. I am Ken Wetmore. We are WholeLife Church, episode 263. And we found out that Ken has some interesting stories. Let's take a listen.
So it became this thing to the point where one of my colleagues came back one day from doing a story where there was this whole thing on Guam where they'd built some sort of outdoor basketball court, and they did a dedication. Anyway, the kids were playing basketball on the court, and this kid hit this half court shot, and he throws his hands up in the air and goes, "I am Ken Wetmore." And so that's one of my favorite stories of all time, just because it is.
He is Ken Wetmore, pop cultural icon.
No, on Guam.
No, on Guam.
If I ever write an autobiography,
it's a whole country
famous on Guam.
How many people can say that?
Well, it's actually a territory of the United States, to be quite technical.
True.
Okay, so all right, so
I think it does actually have a good that could preach. You could probably.
I think you could end every. You could, when you turn to camera 3 at the end and be like, guys, thanks for joining us. I am Ken Whitmore.
It just feels like more, though, that I really would like it to be about Jesus than about me. So
just change it up a little.
That's true. I
am a child of God.
Oh, there we go. We can do that.
Richard, if you're listening, we just came up with this whole new way that you can sing this song, and you can thank Ken for that. So if you're new and you never heard that story before, maybe next time encourage Ken to look at camera 3 right before the end of his message and say, I am Ken Whitmore with the big flex. What a great story. If you want to hear the whole story, go to episode 263. That episode was the first that featured Ken, and that came out on June 16th. So not too far back down the scroll list, you will find that. And since that time, we've done some bonus episodes where he has shared additional stories from his time in different places, some on Guam, some at other churches that he's been to. And so you will always find a good story with Ken. And that just made me realize that we probably need to hit on those a few times throughout the year, and not always just wait for them to hit, but go searching for them, because they're a lot of fun and they show a side of Ken that just makes me laugh. And I can just see this kid flexing and going, I am Ken Whitmore with the basketball shot. That's hilarious. All right. And that takes us up to present day. We were episode 290 was the last one where we talked about simply Christmas and simple peace and the comments that we read earlier at the beginning of the episode. And here's just a little snippet from that episode where I just thought it was a really nice place for us to leave for this year, and to just say, thank you guys so much for listening each and every week and for sharing the podcast. We've seen our numbers increase over the course of the year. And so thank you so much for listening and for sharing again. And I hope you had a magnificent Christmas if you spent time with us at WholeLife Church for candlelight communion or Christmas services. I know you were blessed like I was, and we will be back next week with Ken and Jeff. And as we begin our new year here at WholeLife Church, I know we revealed the theme a couple of weeks ago, Arise. And so we have lots to look forward to. We have a lot more content and great episodes that we'll be bringing to you over the course of the year, hopefully more of those bonus episodes. And as always, please do send your feedback, podcast@wholelife.church, or by email and text and voicemail to 407-965-1607. Always happy to know what you're thinking and to take your comments and your questions and just your observations. And like I always say, things that we missed, something that we didn't say, should have said differently, or just, it's okay to disagree as well. We'd be happy to answer those and to take those comments or questions as they come, because that's how we all grow together. And again, this is a great method to share the gospel, share the good news, share what's happening at WholeLife Church, share a welcoming place for people to listen and be safe, and also for a place to invite someone to come and say, if you like the podcast, you should be there during the weekend and enjoy a Saturday with us at WholeLife Church, and maybe a Bible study class, or just hanging out in the lobby and meeting new people and coming to a safe place. And so I think the podcast is a good tool to do that. So again, thank you for all the listens this year and for the feedback and the support. It always means a lot. And we'll be back next week, and it'll be 2022. And hopefully this is our best year together yet. Thank you guys for listening so much. And here's a clip from our last episode to finish us out.
When you try to create peace in your life, you wind up taking people out of your life that you actually need to help you be a better person. You will wind up, even the people that you originally are friends with or marry or whatever, you're going to have to get rid of them eventually, because at some point they are going to bring some chaos into your life. It's inevitable. It's human relationships. And so you cannot curate your peace. You can't create it on your own. You have to rely on Jesus to give it to you.
Hi, this is Randy Magray, podcast producer and host here at WholeLife Church. Loving people into a lifelong friendship with God is our mission at the WholeLife Church, and our podcasts, Speaking of Grace and its companion, 15 with Andy, Randy, and Jeff, are designed to help facilitate conversations that help us grow together in that pursuit. Now that you've heard the message for this week, don't forget to check out the WholeLife takeaways for this message. Swipe up in today's show notes and join the conversation. Speaking of conversations, each Wednesday morning we take a closer look at the week's message. That's right, the one you just listened to. We discuss practical ways to apply spiritual lessons and ask honest questions about the issues we face as Christians, all focused through the lens of grace. Your voice is a welcomed addition to that conversation. We encourage your thoughts and your questions by sending a voicemail or text to 407-965-1607 or send an email to podcast@wholelife.church. You can find everything podcast related on our website, wholelife.church/podcast. And plan on spending every Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning with us as we bring you the WholeLife Church inspiration you love straight into your headphones. Thanks for listening and have a great week.